Hi there everyone. My name is Wes Salisbury, and as part of this session we're going to be diving into the workflow and approval capabilities inside of Sage Intacct. In particular, the purchasing module. In the purchasing module is where you can create things like purchase requisitions, purchase orders, receivers, things like that. And all throughout those steps you can configure the system to perform whatever approvals or route things for approval in whatever manner you need. So one thing of note before I get started is I have two tabs open on my browser window. I have this tab which has me signed in as myself. I'm going to be submitting a purchase requisition for some services, and this is going to be routed for approval, and this transaction is going to be routed to Katie McCloskey, who is a department manager who is going to approve the transaction that I code to her department. So I'm going to switch back over to my user, and before I get started, Sage Intacct is capable of many different types of workflows, and you can configure it to accommodate essentially every organization's approval needs. But the example I'm using today is an example where transactions get routed to whoever the department manager is for the transaction. So if I go, just real quick, before I get started with the transaction, if I go under my department listing here under my company module, I'm going to see that Katie McCloskey is the manager off to the right here for each of these 4 departments that start with 1. So whenever I put in an order for operations or marketing or outreach or fundraising, it's going to need approvals by Katie. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and proceed on to my purchasing module. And every organization on Sage Intacct, their purchasing module, they'll all be different from one another because each organization has specific needs as to how many steps in the workflow they need and what types of documents all need to be processed and everything there. Most likely, though, you'll have fewer choices than this instance. But we'll go ahead and submit this go ahead and get a purchase requisition started, and then we shall proceed from there. So when I select the plus button for a purchase requisition, it's taking me to my requisition form screen. And this is where I can enter things like the date of the requisition, which I'll leave as today. For the vendor, I will use Stanford Plumbing and Heating. Once again, or one thing that you can do inside of Intacct is you don't need to know the vendor ID off the top of your head. All you have to do is just start typing in the name and then just tab, and then it will autofill based on what it finds. So for Stanford Plumbing and Heating, let's just say I'm a facilities manager. I need to get some services done on a heater that we have here. So in the message field here, I'm just going to say, need repairs on heater. I'll just say water heater, just to be a little bit more specific. And this isn't just something on requisitions. This is a common piece across pretty much every data object across Intacct. So there is an attachment field here that I can use if I want to, or if you require it, to provide supporting documentation for what it is you're purchasing. So to bring an attachment, all you have to do is just click and drag whatever file you want onto the requisition screen, and it will just automatically attach whatever it is you selected, even if it's 10 separate files, onto the requisition. And this is important so that the approver knows, has some supporting documentation for deciding whether to approve it or decline it. And ultimately, it's just really, really handy for audit purposes too, when you have proper documentation attached directly to the transaction, as opposed to floating around in some file cabinet somewhere. So if I click on this attachment button here, I can see the image version of a prior invoice that we have received from this vendor. And this I added this just so that it would help Katie figure out this is what they charged last time, this is the type of thing they charged for, is this reasonable, things like that. So with that being said, I'm going to scroll down here and go down to my entries area. And the entries area is where I'm indicating what it is I'm purchasing. So I'll go ahead and choose my item ID because in general, the purchasing module can be used to purchase items. However, if you don't really purchase items and you just want to have a general ledger account selection here, you can set that up as well. It all depends on what your needs are. But I'm going to select facilities maintenance as my item ID. And I'm just going to go through real quickly and tag some activities to my various departments and sites. And this isn't really pertaining to a particular project, so I'm just going to use the all nines, my non-project or grant-related code. So depending on what it is I'm purchasing, you can make selections for the unit based on measures of time, number of units, dozens, half dozens, pairs, whatever. But since this is a facilities maintenance item, it's a service item, so we'll go ahead and say I'm estimating how many hours of service that I think we'll need from Stanford Plumbing. I'll just say 15 hours, and last time I checked, they billed at $135 an hour for labor. Just selecting a price there. So the purchasing module inside of Intacct takes the quantity of what you're purchasing and then multiplies it by the rate, the individual unit rate, to arrive at an extended price of $2,025. Now, in the event where I started this requisition and I needed to make some modifications later, or need to get paperwork, or otherwise I'm not ready yet to submit it, I could save it as a draft, which doesn't submit it, and then I can come back to it later and make modifications and then submit it to Katie. However, in this case, I'm ready to submit it, so I'm going to select Submit. All right, so I hit Submit on my purchase requisition, and then it takes me back to my list here, and I can see that the one I just submitted, it's in a submitted state. And so what will happen when I hit submit here, Katie is going to receive an approval on her email, or a notice in her email saying, "Hey Katie, you have something to approve. This is the vendor. Here's who submitted it, and then here's a message that the submitter entered in when they submitted it." But Katie will go into purchasing here and go to Approve Transactions. So once I select Approve Transactions in Katie's screen, I'm going to see all the different purchasing transactions that I have the authority to approve at this point. And you can pass purchasing transactions through multiple people. So maybe Katie can be the first step of 3 or the last step of 3, whatever. But in this case, Katie is the only approver. To see I do have the option to just approve straight from here, but I would rather go into the transaction itself and get a full view of what's happening here and what all needs to be approved. So once I click into this purchase requisition and I hit the View button, I'm able to see at the top here what the total of the purchases are or what were entered. And then I can see who the vendor is, what the message is. So I can see here that this user needs repairs on the water heater. And like what I showed you before, if you associate an attachment, a document attachment with a transaction, any downstream user, whether now or 7 years in the future, can pull up a copy of that file and then look at it and evaluate it. But other than that, I'm pretty content with what I see here. I'm good to approve this. So up here at the upper right, I have 2 options. So I can either approve this or decline it. If I decline it, it's going to send an email back to the original submitter saying, this person declined your transaction, please make some changes and resubmit it. However, and that will just take us through the process of just going back as me and resubmitting it. But as part of what I want to show you here, I want to go ahead and hit approve. And when I hit approve, it's asking me to leave some comments. Now, if something is important for you to keep in the audit trail regarding this transaction, you want to make sure you note it in the comments, because these comments that you leave here are forever stamped on this transaction. So again, whether it's tomorrow or 7 years in the future, you can go to that transaction and figure out exactly what it was for, who approved it, who declined it, and why. But I'll just go ahead and leave a basic comment saying, looks good. Then I'll hit approve. And now Katie's approved transactions queue is all empty. And I'll go ahead and tab over to my other tab here where I'm signed in as me, the submitter. And now I can see my requisition is in a state of pending. And that means it's approved. I can then convert it on down to a purchase order, place the order with the vendor, and then ultimately process everything from there. One thing of note really quick, I just wanted to go into this requisition we just submitted, and once it opens, I will go to the history tab, and then I'll have an approval history link here. And this is the area in which you go to see a full history of who approved, who declined this transaction, and why. So in this case, it's relatively simple because it's just a single approver, but I can see that Katie approved this on 7/28/22, and Katie left these comments. So with that, that was a quick overview of of how approvals work inside the purchasing module of Sage Intacct, what the end users see both on the submitting side as well as the approving side, and some of the audit trail features that are linked to transactions. So with that, thank you for your time, and we shall see you on another session. Thank you.